Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm RevPGs and today we're going to be reviewing the spectacular 2.0 update for Wuthering Waves. There's a lot to get into, so let's not waste any time and get right into the review. Before we do that though, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Greatly appreciate all the support recently. So without further ado, let's get into the review. I already expected going into the story for 2.0 that it would be a massive improvement compared to the game's release, as version 1.3 and version 1.4 had some of the most cinematic moments I've ever seen in a gacha, but what I wasn't expecting was a story I enjoyed so much to the point I was completely invested during my live stream of the full questline. The full questline takes 6 to 8 hours to complete depending on your pacing, and usually I'm not a massive fan of these long drawn out story updates in gacha games, as usually most of the time, the questline is just talking about the same topic over and over again, with little to no pacing. I'm mainly speaking about you, Paimon. I don't need a recap of what just happened 1 second ago, you annoying little rat. It's almost as if in most gacha games, they don't really expect you to comprehend what happened in a cutscene or what you've just done, when they will literally make every single character on the screen speak about exactly what just happened, which is just extremely annoying, and thankfully that is not a thing in this update. And though there were some points I feel like should have been left out or maybe should have been shorter overall, there was not a moment of boredom during the story. I can also look past this since this is the first questline to a new region and a new arc, so it's justified to have a lot of long build up just for the sake of future story patches. You know, it's okay to have an information overload in this update because it's just the first part in the arc, the current arc, which means in future updates, if they expand on this will be completely fine. But honestly, I'm not mad about this because they pace things out quite well in my opinion, where they didn't give you way too much information, they gave you just enough to be asking questions, and I think everything was wrapped up nicely within this quest. And I'm not really sure where they're going to take the direction of the story in the future for this new region and this new arc. It very much feels like it's concluded already, but that's kind of like a red herring. I have a feeling that the story in this update is very much a red herring, and there's something even worse going on, or something else is going to happen in the next update that will expand upon the current questline, because there's a lot of things that haven't really been explained yet, but they've left it open in a way that you don't feel like you're disappointed or left on any cliffhangers, which is absolutely brilliant. The voice acting is absolutely perfect in this update, which is a massive improvement from the previous patches. Though the voice acting was getting better overall in the previous 2 patches, it genuinely does not compare to the absolute diversity in the current voice cast for the current region. Not every character sounds the same, which is great. You've got a mix of British, American and Italian accents, which is super cool to see, as most of the time in gacha games you'll only be hearing American accents. This doesn't mean every moment of the voice acting was perfect though. I'm specifically speaking about Rukia. Her English voice in some scenes, she sounds great, but in others she sounds a bit too monotone without any personality. And some people may say that's the whole point of a character who's supposed to be monotone, but yeah, no, the dub is very inconsistent on whether a character should be having emotions or not. Rukia's combat voice sounds very, good in my opinion, and perfectly fine, but in some story moments her voice just doesn't fit her character whatsoever. An example of a almost monotone character that has a personality and you can really like her is Anbi from Zenless Zero, and there's many examples of monotone characters that still have a personality, but I don't know, she seems like she should have a personality based on her animations and her voice lines, but she doesn't really seem to have that at the minute, and I'm not too sure if that's on the voice actress herself or if it's on the voice direction for the script writers and the translation, because this has been a problem in the past with gacha games, where voice actors won't really know what kind of voice tone they should choose for their role because they aren't really given too much direction, which is probably the case for WooWork because in the previous updates, a lot of characters had inconsistent voice lines where sometimes they sounded pretty good, sometimes they sounded god awful, and sometimes they sounded brilliant. And the main character is a good example of this. The main character for the female Rover, the voice isn't very good from what I've heard from other people, but the male voice actor has recently really improved on his voice lines, and you can actually really, tell that he's supposed to be the main character and not some random NPC in the background. It's the opposite for the female MC, which is a shame, in my opinion. I do think this is mainly the casting's fault and the script writer's fault and, the voice direction. Nothing to do with the voice actors themselves. I'm pretty sure they're very talented and they could do way better than me, that's for sure. Other than that, the voice acting was stellar throughout. I really enjoyed Carlotta, Danny's, and Katicia's voices especially. Zonna's voice was perfect and definitely gave off that elegant but badass Italian, bodyguard type vibe. Carlotta's voice is very soft and graceful and very British. The same goes for Katicia. I still can't pronounce her name and I probably never will. I've got a speech impediment in the form of an accent, so that just happens, I guess. But yeah, the voice acting for this whole entire quest line and even the NPCs, absolutely stellar. It's definitely a step up from the previous updates. Of course, you got some returning faces as well, and many new faces. And there's so many new voice actors that I really am enjoying learning more about through their characters and how their voices sound throughout, the story. It's really nice to actually be able to understand the differences between each character, because a lot of other games, like I said, they only have American voice actors and so on, and you can kind of get them mixed up sometimes. You might accidentally mistake another character for, a character in a different game because, you've heard these voice actors before or they sound very similar. With this, you don't really get that because there's so much diversity in the form of different accents and, different ways they speak. You got things like that, which I really enjoy. Overall, the story was phenomenal in places, especially during those absolutely stunning cutscenes with picturesque visuals. The characters were very likable and unique, with not only very different and pretty designs, but also very diverse accents and very likable personalities. The world building is brilliant, and honestly, I cannot wait to see more in the future. So what's new to Wuthering Waves? Well, other than a new arc, there's a stunning and absolutely massive new region to explore, with many new activities to take part in, and many new mechanics to discover. Many of which I was having so much fun with, which is disappointing since some of these new puzzles and minigames are a one-time only thing, or at least for now in this version, maybe in the future, and in different updates they will add more to these mechanics, or maybe they'll use these mechanics more in gameplay, story, stuff like that. But I don't want to give you a information overload, so let's just break down a few things at first, starting with the new mechanics, one thing at a time. Starting off with the coolest new addition, the flight mechanics. And no, I'm not talking about your boring gliding mechanic from before, that's still the same. With 2.0, we now have a full-on wing glider type ability, like Far Cry 5 and a couple of other games, which allows us to fully take flight, which is awesome, and honestly probably one of the best additions to the game. The flight itself is very smooth and easy to control. It's super fun being able to jump off like a low area, taking flight, and then using your booster ability to fly up further to get to places that would usually take ages to climb, even with parkour mechanics. There's also many flight challenges you can try using this new ability. These are unfortunately very easy with zero challenge to them whatsoever, but it makes up for that with the satisfying environment as you were doing these flight challenges. I was paying more attention to the environment more than the actual challenges themselves, to be honest. Looking at the scenery as I was flying through these rings, trying to get, well, not really trying to get the highest score, getting the highest score first try because they were way too easy. I'd say the only big flaw about this mechanic is that you can only use flight in the current region once you have actually unlocked the ability, that is. You can only use it in the current region, Redicita, and you cannot use it anywhere else. This means you don't really feel that freedom of flight in the previous regions, which is a shame, if I'm being honest, because it seems like a wasted opportunity to make exploration even more fun, even in the early areas of the map. There are many other puzzles and mechanics in the latest area to partake in, such as dodge challenges, which were super fun but could easily be exploited using Camellia. You can transform into 2 different types of echoes to solve puzzles and try many activities, such as punching rocks like Raiden from Metal Gear, or tracing the outline of certain objects perfectly for rewards. These were quite fun. Both of these echoes are very different. There was other puzzles you could solve as well, but you don't really get rewards from these. They're just like stuff for like your shell credits, which is just your normal currency. You buy stuff in like the shop for upgrade your character, so those are pretty irrelevant, but they were fun too. There's also the strange painting puzzles where you have to make every cube the same color in a certain amount of turns. Basically, you click one, you select a color, and you have to make every cube the same color. Most of these were quite easy, but there were a few that were genuinely difficult, which was fun and added a sense of a sense of difference to the gameplay compared to every other Gacha game's exploration. There's many other puzzles that I could speak about too, such as one-time puzzles and many other things, but there's so much to this game in terms of these new mechanics that I don't think I should speak about them, because they're all great, but the only flaw is there's a very limited amount of them, and exploration is very easy. Another thing I did notice though is there's no chests in the normal sense. You can go to camps and stuff, and then there's chests there, and they will show you a little chest icon on the map, and you'll have to find all the chests in the area. Other than that though, you don't find chests or loot in the open world, which is kind of a waste in my opinion. Though I did still enjoy exploring the map, it didn't take me long to 100% every area on the map. Sona Casket to back. There is a lot to do, but these activities don't really take too much time, and there's not too many of them. So though there is a lot more to it, to exploration stuff, you could do all of this in one day, which is a big flaw in my opinion. Because once you've explored the latest map, played all the endgame content, played the story, there's nothing to do, and that's a big flaw in my opinion. There's also a crap ton of new enemies to kill and collect as echoes. There's 3 new bosses. There's a 4th main boss at the end of the latest story, but of course that's a weekly boss, so that's a separate thing. You can use all of these in battle as well if you collect them as echoes. The bosses were great, but don't get me wrong, they're quite easy, which is something I want to see more of in the future, is more challenge to these bosses. I'm not sure about the weekly bosses because I haven't got to the stage yet where I can beat them at the highest difficulty, because I'm not a high enough level yet. You know, I did not play this game too much until recently, but other than that, the enemy designs are awesome. You got some really interesting mechanics with some of the enemies. You've got a secret boss, you've got many other enemies that you can find. There's tough enemies, I won't lie. There's these little combat areas where you have to beat objectives, which are super fun. And honestly, overall the combat is great, but the bosses themselves aren't that hard, if I'm being honest. They're quite easy to beat, even easier than the previous bosses, I would say, which is a big shocker. There's also nightmare enemies, which are basically like a remixed version of previous bosses that you fought before, which could be like anything from like the crownless enemy or whatever else it is, like the heron, things like that, and you have to beat them, and it's pretty much like a different variant of that boss. I think they have the same abilities though, I could be wrong, but yeah. There's a lot more to the combat in this update. There's even more features. The latest character, Carlotta, is super fun to play as. There's a lot more to the combat, and I can't wait to see more in the future for what they're going to do with the combat. I'm assuming there's going to be even more in-depth characters in the future, where you can really tell the difference between certain characters, because I've noticed Zani seems to be using a shield, and whatever her name is, I think it's I can't remember, Phoebe, that's it, Phoebe, she uses like a staff weapon, which is very different, which, you know, adds a lot to the combat. It adds a lot of value to getting these characters because their combat styles are very different and they vary depending on what type they are, which is good because I don't want to see the same characters using the same weapons pretty much. So that's great, and honestly the combat is a big improvement overall, which I don't get how it could improve even more because it was brilliant before. But yeah, there's a lot more to do with the combat, hundreds of new echoes, and just so much to collect within these combat, you know, areas, and there's a lot to do. Overall, 2.0 is a massive improvement compared to the previous versions. The story is exceptional, the music is phenomenal, which, as I said in my previous reviews, the soundtrack wasn't very memorable before, but now it is. The puzzles are fun, but unfortunately there's a lack of them, and the ones that do exist are already marked on your map for you, and chests are very hard to come by. The combat is a massive improvement, but the latest world bosses are a bit too easy to beat. To be honest, the only big flaw of this update is the performance, though most of these things and issues have been patched by now. During the first few days I encountered many crashes and issues which were pretty annoying, but hopefully this will be a one-time thing. The new abilities are super fun and satisfying, but only being able to use flight in the latest areas is disappointing and missed potential. The new interiors for certain quests and main mission areas are highly detailed. There's even a stealth mission and a side quest where the main goal is to ascend 3 different towers. The platforming aspect of the game is also very relevant now and has more involvement in the story. The NPC designs are absolutely stunning and look brilliant. Some of them even look like 4 stars. I'm actually shocked with how detailed some of the latest NPCs are. They're mainly shopkeepers and stuff, but they look brilliant. They're almost like, you know, Zenless Zone Zero NPCs, which is honestly brilliant. Wuthering Waves 2.0 is almost like a completely new game, but unfortunately there's still not too much endgame content to play through, and the same goes for events, making the game feel stale at times. But overall the game is on the right path and leaves me itching for more in 2.1. I can't wait to see more from the story, scenery and content. Exploration was super fun, despite there not being too much to find and a lack of side quests. So my final rating for Wuthering Waves version 2.0 will be a 10 out of 10. The reason I'm giving this rating is because, despite the flaws of this update, it is a 2.0 release, it's a 0.0 release, so basically it's a start to a new arc, it's a fresh slate. So I'm not going to blame them for the issues that are currently going on, because there's room for improvement. In fact, I believe 2.1 will be a massive improvement overall if they're continuing on this path, because if they can add more depth to their new, you know, content, their new puzzles and their new features, then I believe there will be more value in staying and sticking around. If they can add a new endgame content mode or some sort of event that goes on for 2.1, I will honestly really enjoy that, and it will give me more value to play it and review it. So if you liked my rating, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, let me know in the comments. If you have any advice, support, or any feedback you want to give in the comments, just let me know. I'm happy to any criticism, whether it's valid or not. You know, I love some good criticism. So if you want me to review a certain game, or you don't like my reviews, or you want something to improve, just let me know. So without further ado, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.